So thank you all for being here, and thanks the Reload team for organizing such a fantastic event. So we will discuss about the role of policies and institutions in trying to close the massive brain drain that we are currently experiencing in Greece. So we will start with Lois Labrianidis. He will give us his perspective and the points of views, both from his academic and a bit his recent policy experience. And then we will move to Dimitris, who will discuss a recent project of many Greek academics/entrepreneurs who try to produce some cutting-edge research on how we can improve the current institutional situation in Greece. And I will also share some of my thoughts as I contributed in this effort. And then Vicky will be our last speaker, discussing her very big, drawing on her vast experience from the British experience. She will share her thoughts about what can be done in the case of Greece, extrapolating a bit from the British experience. So Lloyd, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be here. It's a great honor to be here because of the speakers and the audience. It's again because of the topic of this conference is crucial for Greece at this stage. It gives me the opportunity to present you today some preliminary thoughts on how to handle the brain drain. Before I start, one point of clarification. I'm here in my capacity as an academic. The policy thoughts that I'm going to present are not governmental policy. And two apologies. I will read most part of my presentation, and I would like to ask your apologies for my pronunciation. Right. Let me start first giving you a sketch, a very rough sketch of the brain drain phenomenon and its causes. A very rough sketch, very sketchy thing. During the crisis, the high-quality human capital is perhaps one of the greatest comparative advantages of Greece. However, especially since the crisis, an increasing immigration of graduates has occurred, and this constitutes a major obstacle in the economic development of the country. We estimate that in 2015, around 190,000 Greek professionals of first generation were working abroad, a number that constitutes more than 15% of people with tertiary education in Greece. If we go back and see, the immigration transition, since the early 60s, what we see is that immigration from Greece up to the late 70s was primarily blue-collar immigration. The first column, this column, is 0 to 2. That means up to the second, up to gymnasio. The second column is up to the tertiary sector, and the third column is the tertiary sector and above. So immigration up to the late 70s, as you can see, was mainly blue-collar immigration, and since then there is an increase of high-skilled immigration, which during the crisis it increased even further. During the crisis period, brain changed in several respects. For example, because more and more graduates are leaving due to the dead ends they encounter in Greece, they can no longer be picky. The number of countries to which the Greeks might migrate is over 95 and has more than doubled, during the crisis period. There's what Vertrovi calls superdiversity. And another thing that goes this way is that the share of people of more than 30 years that have increased as you can see, the share of people more than 30 years reached 46% from 10% that it was back in the 60s. Why is the brain drain? Undoubtedly, the most fundamental reason for this major exodus of professionals from Greece is the mismatch of the labor market, resulting in a substantial unemployment, underemployment among professionals, doing jobs that they are overqualified for, accepting badly paid jobs, etc., etc. The predominant explanation of this mismatch is that this is due to the oversupply of professionals. However, the percentage of graduates in the total population is below the average of both the OECD and the EU countries. That is, the low utilization of graduates in Greece cannot be solely contributed to an oversupply in the labor market. Moreover, the underutilization of graduates in Greece cannot be primarily attributed to poor studies in Greek universities. Needless to say, brain drain increased drastically during the economic crisis due to the stringers of the Greek economy. However, the problem did not arise during the crisis. It's a structural problem. It's a problem of the Greek economy. Brain drain from Greece could mostly be attributed to the low demand of graduates from the private sector, as the country has not been able to occupy a higher position in the global value chain in order to produce more innovative products and services. As you can see, Greece presents one of the lowest shares of employment in high technology sectors. Moreover, if we compare the ratio of unemployment rates of people with secondary education over those with tertiary education, these are the columns, and these are for Greece. We can argue that in Greece, tertiary education cannot protect you to the same extent from unemployment, cannot be used as a shield for unemployment. Finally, R&D expenditure in Greece is much lower compared to EU, 0.68, 1.91. And this is even more acute regarding the contribution of the private sector. If you see this, 54.6% for EU average, it's only 32% for Greece. It is evident that the main weaknesses are recorded in the cases of companies' low spending on R&D and the frail collaboration by the university industry sector. It is thus clear that restricted employment opportunities for graduates in Greece are primarily the result of low demand by the private sector, as Greek firms are not oriented towards the promotion of knowledge-intensive activities. The loss of these talents further diminishes the potential for higher competitiveness, which imposes a vicious cycle of underdevelopment that does not allow the country to escape from the crisis. This, combined with the inability of the Greek research system to attract talented researchers and scientists, leads to further exacerbation of the outflow of graduates. The problem of brain drains goes back to the 60s, and there were quite a lot of policies applied since then, both by countries and the international organizations. We can divide them in two main policies. One is the return option, that is, which aims upon their return, but they failed. They failed almost in every country, apart from those few countries when they had high growth rates. And the other option that I'm going to argue for is the diaspora option, or the virtual return option. For some time, in this case, we recognize that for some time, the people will remain abroad, and so we need policies to strengthen their ties with the country of origin while they remain in the destination country. So how is Greece dealing with the brain drain? In the long run, as I've told you, but it's in the long run, the solution lies if we manage to achieve a better position in the international division of labor by moving up along the value chain. The problem is what we are going to do in the short and medium run, where we can expect neither a significant share of expatriates to return, nor a cessation of graduates emigrating from Greece. So how we can face that? There are already policies producing immediate results, and I'm speaking about policies strengthening the self-employment of graduates, recruitment to universities of people with doctoral degrees, positive discrimination of young doctorates to be recruited as teaching staff in open universities. Regarding policies with short-term, medium-term effects, we have policies that increase the investment activity in the country by creating a more challenging and attractive business environment through the provision either of subsidies to enterprises by the new investment law, or the structural funds, or the Juncker plan, etc., etc. And moreover, there is the policy, it's called the Return to Greece program, that might help to the return of some professionals. What I'm going to argue is that Greece must utilize the valuable human capital of diasporas, considering that in the near future at least, they will remain abroad. We must consider the Greek professionals working abroad as a significant pipeline interconnecting between the Greek economy and the productive and innovative international centers. Every Greek professional is not on his own, should be seen as a node in a system with many connections which can link the Greek economy to this system. So we need to facilitate the smooth realization of every possible cooperation between the people, these people and Greece, both while they are in the country of residence, as well as facilitating them to work intermittently to Greece. To this end, we propose the creation of the network that we call bridges of knowledge, bridges of partnership. What we think that this network can do? There are 6 key actions that we can do. The first one is a formation of a coordination team. Might have an executive body of ministers, a steering committee consisting of Greek professionals, entrepreneurs, academics, researchers, and artists who live and work abroad. And on the public side, a lean and flexible operational team to solve practical issues. We have to create a website that will provide continuous information for those wishing to return to cooperate with Greece while working abroad. Third, we must provide incentives for those that developed relations with Greece and reward all those that they consider notable initiatives. Fourth, organize events in Greece and abroad in cooperation with charitable organizations and private donors and Greek communities. Fourth, create an interconnection offices in a few Greek consulates in countries with significant concentration of Greek scientists. And finally, do research, constant research on brain drain phenomena so as to update our understanding. I think that's it. And I hope that this way Greek professionals working abroad will transfer their ideas and knowledge through collaborations with universities and research centers, with private companies, or by establishing their own businesses. A bridge that might later bring them back with immediate positive results for themselves and for the whole society, Greek society, and the economy, as it will, on top of everything else, can facilitate the change of the growth model of the country, which, to my mind, is quite vital. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Elias. Thanks very much to Reload Greece for inviting me to talk about this book. So the title of my presentation is also the title of this forthcoming book, or actually tentative title. So okay, I will kind of, in some sense, I can talk about this book from 2 aspects. One is really pertaining to the topic about the Greek economy and kind of how to improve things. The other is, and this is what I will emphasize more, is an entrepreneurial project that involves diaspora Greeks working together with Greeks in Greece and trying to kind of achieve complementarities among them. So I will emphasize quite a bit this aspect at the request of the organizers. So anyway, so just a few words about the book first. So the goal of the book is to kind of be a far-ranging effort to review many key areas of economic policy in Greece. And for each of the areas, I don't know, like education, healthcare, pensions, whatever, many areas, I will summarize them later. We go over the pre-crisis conditions, then the developments during the crisis, and then we present ideas and policy options going forward. So it's an edited volume. So the editors, there are 4 editors that Elias mentioned, And then each chapter, the editors have worked on some of the chapters, but also there have been a number of other contributors who have worked on their areas of expertise for the corresponding chapters. There has been close interaction between them and the book editors, and between also chapter authors. Has been a total maybe of about 30 people involved in that undertaking. So chapters we endeavor to use to perform a kind of rigorous economic analysis, use a kind of economics 101 to think about problems in the Greek economy, and at the same time use a lot of data, in some cases data that has been produced especially just for this book, gathered, produced, and they also many comparisons between Greece and other countries, like we view this benchmarking as being a very important part of the exercise. So the book is accessible to readers without formal training in economics, and of particular interest to policymakers or other economists in the private sector, the finance, banks, firms, other firms, journalists, and academics, researchers, and students. This is what we view as the main kind of audiences. Now, the goal was that somehow had seen so much being written on Greece since the beginning of the crisis, but we felt that quite a bit of that was kind of superficial. It was not really about the root causes of the poor performance. So, for example, a lot has been written about the debt, which we don't view it as the main problem of Greece. What is the main kind of, the main pathologies that made Greece vulnerable to the crisis. So we wanted really to go to the kind of micro details of the Greek economy to understand how it functions and what the problems are and what actions should be undertaken to deal with them. So we hope that, also in Greece, there is generally a lack of evidence-based policy analysis. And we hope that this extensive data that we have collected can serve as a reference and also to put, hopefully, carefully thought out policy proposals in the spotlight. In terms of the plan of the book, just a very quick plan, it has 14 chapters. So there is an introductory chapter that kind of goes into detail on a detailed overview of the Greek economy before, during, and the crisis, and also going forward, and then also draws common themes from the different chapters. Part one is about the macroeconomics of the crisis, kind of the Greece and the euro, whether Greece should have entered in the eurozone, what should be done now about the Greece and the eurozone. A chapter on trade adjustment and the competitiveness of Greek firms, why Greece has failed to, why exports have failed to pick up, and what can be done about that, have failed to pick up during the crisis, and what should be done. Then there's a part that's about reforming markets, covers product markets, covers labor markets. Again, what are the how these markets work, what are the problems, what are the regulatory changes that are needed. Chapter on privatizations, and chapter on the financial system and the credit cycle. Opa, what is that? All right. Okay, good. So then there's a third part is about education and healthcare. Fourth part is about a chapter on, about transfers. One is about taxes. The other is chapter is about pensions. And then there is a fifth part about law and order in the public administration, a chapter on the justice system, a chapter on corruption, and a chapter on, two chapters on public administration. So now, let me go now focus a bit on this collaborative aspect. So this is pretty much a collaborative effort between kind of a big team of people, kind of roughly evenly spread between diaspora and home. So the diaspora Greeks have been mainly academics, and mostly academic economists. And the home Greeks have been, some of them academics, some of them policymakers and practitioners, so with extensive kind of policy experience. So, and the idea was to combine the state-of-the-art research with local knowledge. And this is not to say that also there is some state-of-the-art research done in Greece as well. But essentially this was the goal of the goal of bringing this together. So even in the editorial team reflects kind of this mix. With Nikos being in Greece. Nikos also is the Director General of EOVE, leading economic think tank in Greece. So let me just give some, and this will I will end my presentation, just some examples of this fruitful collaboration, why it was good to kind of bring these different perspectives. So one example that that has been kind of, where these complementaries have been very nice, for example, has been the pensions chapter, has been joint work between Stavros Panagieas and who is at UCLA, and Platon Tinios, who is at Piraeus, and actually now he's here today. So essentially this chapter, among other things, it makes a proposal for a drastic reform of the Greek pension system. We all have heard about problems about the Greek pension system and kind of various ways that people think it should be reformed. So what the chapter proposes is a move away from essentially the current system, which is essentially state-run what we call a pay-as-you-go system, where the current young pay for the current old, towards a modern three-pillar system that includes a significant role for pre-funded occupational pensions, where people save for their own pension when they become old, and private pensions. And the key benefit for that, I can just say it very briefly, I mean, this time is very short, is that there is a tighter link between an individual's contributions and their pensions, which effectively makes the contribution rate, the contributions not being like a tax, a labor tax, but and this provides much higher employment incentives for employment and job creation. Essentially, it's a way to lower the tax on employment, which is so high in Greece. Actually, it's the highest in the OECD right now. And this is kind of a major problem in creating jobs. Now, there are, of course, delicate issues about transitioning from one system to another, especially you don't want the current young to pay for the pensions of the current old and also to save for their own pensions in the future, but there are ways to deal with that, and the chapter goes through that. So Platon is a total expert on the Greek pension system. He has like an almost encyclopedic knowledge about all the different funds that existed and the kind of what the pensions contributions were for one fund, for other fund. So this knowledge has been essential for kind of doing this analysis. Stavros is an expert on dynamic macroeconomic models with and used also for pension analysis. And among other things, what this chapter does is that it estimates the benefits of this transition through a calibrated model and shows that just going from one system to another can help raise GDP by 8%, even during the transition stage, and with conservative estimates. That's 8% would not be a bad thing where we are right now. So I can give lots of other examples. Time is short. So the justice system examples, the justice chapter is a collaboration between Elias, who is here. He's an expert on institutional economics and kind of legal institutions, and Stavroula Karadza, who is a lawyer in Athens and has extensive policy experience, has worked also at the Ministry of Justice under one of the previous administrations. And what this chapter does, drawing on the complementary experience of both, it sketches an across-the-board reform of the Greek justice system based on more devolution and more accountability. So, for example, the way promotion of judges and evaluation of judges is done. The tax chapter, again, a collaboration between Kostas Megir, Michael Haliassos, Christos Kotsogiannis, all of whom have extensive experience in kind of analyzing tax changes, kind of the effects of tax changes kind of empirically, kind of using data to evaluate the effects of changing the tax system on total revenue and redistribution of income, and Maria Flevotomou in Greece. So Maria has had a big database, a large panel of Greek households about kind of their income, their consumption. So this has made it possible to estimate a full kind of the effects of transitioning from the current fairly complicated tax system to a simple and integrated tax and welfare system. So and evaluate kind of what would be its effect on implementation, how the revenue could be affected, how the distribution between the rich and the poor could be affected. So these are the kinds of quantitative exercises that would be very much needed to evaluate tax reform in Greece, and they have really not been done in the past to a large extent. So in the final example, and I could go on and on, the international trade chapter, about competitiveness of Greek firms. So there has been a collaboration between Kostas Arkolakis and Aristos Doxiadis and Manolis Galenianos. So Kostas and Manolis are macroeconomists. So they have worked on a macro model to determine what the response of Greek GDP, wages, prices, imports, and exports should have been in response to essentially Greece had to close its trade deficit from 2007 to 2014. It did close it. It could not finance anymore, borrow anymore from abroad. So this implied that an adjustment had to take place. How this adjustment has taken place in Greece, how does this compare with how it happened in Ireland, in Portugal, and Spain? The main finding has been that exports really have underperformed. There has not been a strong export response like in the other countries. And drawing on a lot on Aristos' expertise, they have looked at the macroeconomic determinants of the weak export response. There have been other collaborations as well, like the labor market chapter, the finance chapter. Many chapters kind of draw on these kind of complementary perspectives. So just to summarize, okay, so it has been, in my view, an ambitious project to analyze and dissect the Greek economy, go at depth in the various issues, bring economic theory and data to address policy issues. So it has been a collaborative work between diaspora and home Greeks. Hopefully it can serve as a reference with all the data that it has inside it, and put reform ideas into spotlight. More can be done. One side is just to kind of try to reach an even broader audience by kind of, I don't know, right, kind of try to maybe simply even write the ideas even in a simpler way and go for the mass market. And the other is to maybe dig further into data. This actually would be quite desirable to kind of do this kind of tax experiments, pension experiments, but then we need there is a lot of scope for bringing even more the knowledge of diaspora academics to work with people in Greece. But we need data, state agencies to be more generous with providing data for scientific research. So kind of Greece has been underperforming in that regard relative to other countries in terms of how much kind of public data is made public about various aspects of the economy. So this has to be addressed.
So let me, since it's impossible for me to talk while I'm sitting, so let me a bit continue where Dimitris stopped and give some the views, my personal views, and actually to a great extent shared by many of the co-authors in this big volume, on what we see the challenges lying ahead and how we fit. Actually, personally, I'm involved a lot, to some extent, not a lot, with the activities of Reload Greece. So how do I see the connections between what we're discussing so far and more the academic world where I come from? So if I was to play, if you like, the academic in the crowd, since Dimitris didn't play the entrepreneur, and Lois is becoming a bit of a politician, half. So there are two ways to think about economic growth, at least from a macroeconomic standpoint. The one, which is the old-style neoclassical type of growth, is the one that actually Greece experienced in the 50s, 60s, 70s. You can drag it up until the 80s or the 90s. You have a phase of industrialization, capital accumulation, growth is produced because we invest. We build roads, we give subsidies to factories, it's based on manufacturing, and this is how most countries in the world, like the US, even China in the past 20 years, have grown. This world, at least for Greece, this part of this engine of growth, all the convergence type of gains, to some extent have been exploited. Perhaps there is some, but let's not quarrel how much can this be. But then there is another world, what geeks like me call new growth, or Schumpeterian growth, if you like the more flashy word, where growth is created because people like my friend Christos, or people like Panagis, or many of the people that present and they are involved in Reload, they come up with new ideas. The new idea could be either totally new, but it could be like, with the materials that exist but are already out there, you combine them and then you produce something better, something that you can have high value added. Now, what is the engine of growth in this type of setup? We need different people with different experiences. We need, Dimitris here is like super good in mathematics. We need people like Dimitris. You need people like me who are like very bad at mathematics, but have some good in something else. Then you need people who are very good at combining things. And then if you combine things better and we are heterogeneous, you can produce more output. And this is, in an essence, if Paul Romer gets the Nobel Prize in economics in 2 weeks, he will get it, roughly speaking, for formalizing what I just said. This implies that if Greece is to proceed into the future, we need to have more of this new style type of growth. More research and development, more innovation, more technological improvement, and more technology adoption. So this lag that, Christo, you mentioned that we adopted Facebook with a 2-year delay, perhaps Facebook is useless, but some other technology is best if we adopt it quite early on. So what matters in this setup? Well, the first thing that matters is human capital. And not necessarily average years of schooling, but high quality or high value added type of capital, like engineering, software engineering, mechanical engineering, high value added type of knowledge. And importantly, heterogeneous. It's something that Aristos mentioned in his talk. You need someone who perhaps is very good at programming C++, but some other language, and at the same time he can produce a very nice interface for a program. What's the second thing that it needs? Openness. A large market. And actually, this is actually one of the nice insights, you need a large market for 2 reasons. First, many of the goods that we produce, we want to sell it to many people, ideally. So it's a benefit. So I have an incentive to produce or to write a paper if I know that many people are going to read it. Not many people read my papers, as a side. But that's another issue. Secondly, you need a large market, because in a large market you can find heterogeneous inputs. And this here is where the Reload team or bringing the diaspora can play a role. To produce some goods, we need some inputs that locals have, that entrepreneurs have, innovators have, but then they can use some of the input, for example, that Christos mentor in Palo Alto, I guess at every restaurant provided at some point. So you need these heterogeneous inputs. So you need a big market, and since Greece is a small country, we all believe, I'm one of them, that Greece is by far the most important country in the world, right? But relatively speaking, it's a small country. So we need to be open. And here comes to me what is actually the sorry saga, if you like, of the Greek society and the Greek economy over the past couple of decades, years. Depending on your political affiliation, you can draw the cutoff, but it's prolonged for sure, is that the Greek economy and the Greek society more generally is very closed. So there is this pattern, if you do statistics, that richer countries are those who are by far the most open to international trade, open to foreign direct investment, open to new ideas. And it matters to be open, especially if you are a small country. Because think about it. If you're like China or the US or India, these are like, the US is 350 million people, China is a bit of 1.5 billion, China is approaching this number shortly. So, you can find, if you need a software engineer, there is somewhere in China or in India. Well, in Greece, most likely it's not. Some are there, but some are not. So what seems as a paradox in Greece, especially if you approach it with no knowledge of the idiosyncrasies on the ground, is that Greece is extremely closed. And actually, during the crisis, and this is something that comes from the book, to Aristos and Manolis and Kostas chapter, is that in spite of the fall in wages, in spite of the massive increase in unemployment, exports have not caught up. This is just one aspect of a much bigger problem, which is both economic, I would argue political, and also social, of an economy that it is, in a society that is closed. So, since actually I was asked to also jumpstart the discussion on what can be done and what are the frictions, if you like, or the impediments, I think that there are two. The one which is what economists and many people have focused on, which is the institutions. So it seems that the institutions that Greek entrepreneurs and Greek people more generally are faced up in Greece are extremely sclerotic, are extremely formalistic. To start up a business in Greece, it takes ages. You need an administrative permit from every agency you can imagine. Dimitris mentioned our work with Stavi Karadza on the justice system. You can go in courts, and there are endless procedures and endless processes that, of course, are there to protect insiders. And you can find similar aspects of the institutional background everywhere. So Greece built some institutions which were very parochial, and they were mostly there to protect insiders. And then what political parties actually did is that, perhaps those political insiders changed. There were different people in the 50s and the 60s. Then some people complained because they changed in the 80s. People now complain because, perhaps they changed last year. But related to the issue of institutions is also a matter for innovation, also of culture. And since I work on institutional development all around the world, it seems now that there seems a very strong connection between the institutions that the country has and the beliefs of people. And here I think Reload and many of the people in the ground on the floor can have a very big value for the following reason. Many Greeks, and this is what I'm saying is based on research, so it's based on the data. I know that many Greeks quarrel about the data, but at least this is what the data we have. They're not perfect, but this is what they point out. On average, Greeks are distrustful. They don't trust each other. Especially they distrust others. In the past couple of years, and this is some research I'm doing with some colleagues here in the room, they distrust political parties, they distrust the justice system. Increasingly so, however, they trust the police. So there are some interesting aspects there. Their beliefs and how open they are, for example, about immigrants, about gays and lesbians, they look much, much closer to some countries in the Arab world as compared to Western Europe. And one could say why this matters. Well, there is a lot of research, which I don't have time to go over it, that say that actually they matter and they matter crucially. And let me give you one channel where I can think that many people in the room can have a very big impact. Think of the following situation. We complain a lot in Greece, rightly so, about red tape and corruption. Okay, we say that the Greek public administration, my colleague Michael Jacobidis has done some great work on that, is characterized by corruption, and there are many formalistic procedures. So one could say, let's abolish it. Well, why hasn't Greece abolished that? Can it be that all politicians were bad? I know many politicians who are both bad, but some who are really good and well-intended. Why it has not changed? Let me give you a reason why this has not changed. Well, in Greece, people distrust the entrepreneur. If you read the Greek newspapers, I urge you not to Greek newspapers, but for some stupid reason I keep doing it. if you read the Greek newspapers, you see many Greek entrepreneurs. These Greek entrepreneurs are not like, at least the ones that you will see in the news, are not like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates. They're of a different type. So you see those entrepreneurs, and then you are distrustful to entrepreneurship. Because you see that those entrepreneurs, perhaps they are successful because they were very good at getting those permits, navigating through this complex system of the Greek bureaucracy, getting the permits, perhaps bribing some agencies or some politicians, and being successful. So now, look what's happening. You have a prior that you are distrustful, you distrust entrepreneur, and who do you see as the successful entrepreneur? Actually, this person who went around all these complex procedures by bribing and being successful. So endogenously, what do you want? Who will you vote for? Someone like Aristos who tells you, writing in Kathimerini, we don't need that many red tape, let's abolish administrative procedures. Or you would vote for someone else who will tell you, look, there is this loophole here. So let's ask the entrepreneur for one more permit. So you have a vicious circle where distrust fuels corruption, corruption leads to red tape, and of course we're in a loop, in a vicious loop. And I think their entrepreneurship, and people in this room, and actually I think this is what I was pushing Effie for the reload to show even more, we have to have cases of successful entrepreneurs. And those successful entrepreneurs do not have to be of the form of Bill Gates, but of many people in the room, who did it. And who did it not by bribing the system, by playing in a corrupt way, but doing something big. And I think that you will see more and more entrepreneurs, and those entrepreneurs, as the Reload team's idea is, they're going to be more and more connected to the diaspora, and the diaspora will have a role on what's happening in Greece. So thanks a lot, and now I'll ask Vicky to come and share her views.
I think we had a fascinating series of things about what's wrong with Greece. And it's interesting when you're doing comparisons across, because first of all, we mustn't forget that Greece has just been through hell. And 25% loss of GDP is quite a shock. I'm quite convinced if there had been a 25% loss of GDP in the UK, we probably would have lynched our leaders. It is extraordinary that the Greeks have actually shown this resilience, and the demonstrations we've seen are nothing really by comparison to what could have been happening. It is unthinkable that you could have had democracy still working in this country here in the UK if we had had the same cut in incomes as Greece has seen. So first of all, a very positive thing about the Greeks and how they've managed it. Things are looking pretty hard ahead, but we are finally in a position where, in a time when maybe things are normalizing, and CEBR is forecasting, of course, an increase in GDP for next year. Remember, we've had forecasts of increases in GDP many years back. It still hasn't happened, but who knows? We can keep our fingers crossed. But I think we've been discussing about some of the deeper problems of Greece, and you wanted me to compare it a bit with what we've learned here in the UK, but the point of openness, it would be quite interesting if some of the people who voted for Brexit could listen to you, because it matters for big firms as it does for small firms. And of course, what matters is trade. And we heard from a number of presentations how important that is. And of course, if trade isn't expanding, particularly whatever you may be doing in terms of your structure of the economy, if the world around you is slowing down, which is exactly where we've gone right now, and where world trade itself is suffering, it's growing very, very slowly by comparison to where it should be at this time of the cycle because of sanctions, geopolitics. Greece is suffering from some of those, but benefiting in terms of tourism, for example, more of it coming into Greece. But nevertheless, it is not the environment in which you can very easily increase your exports, except, as I was saying, tourism. But what it has also shown, in terms of the Greek experience, is that obviously the policies of the IMF and the Europeans has been wrong in the sense of thinking that you can actually improve your competitiveness as a country through this internal devaluation which has taken place. It has done nothing in terms of attracting a lot of inward investment. In reality, I think, unless I'm mistaken, we're probably cheaper right now to produce a unit of output than is the case in possibly Romania, Bulgaria, and elsewhere, where a lot of the investment from the northern European countries is going to. It doesn't seem to have had that desired increase in foreign direct investment, despite the fact we seem to have loads of skills, and those skills just move elsewhere. So what has happened in the UK, and why, in a way, the focus that we in Greece and by comparison to the UK, and why the focus we're having right now, perhaps on creating new firms And encouraging these ideas, however wonderful that is something we just need to think about a little bit more first. Of course we need that. Of course we need, in any country where there are loads of startups and failures, you tend to get better productivity. It can, of course, be quite destructive if it's overdone. And the problem with Greece is that it has a structure which simply does not contain enough big firms. It does not contain enough big manufacturing entities. If you did have those, first of all, you wouldn't have the corruption you have because it would be pay as you earn. So you'd be paying your taxes regularly. We have possibly too many SMEs. Maybe that stems from the fact that when we emerged from the Ottoman Empire, we were basically a subsistence economy. And loads of agricultural land, of course, is divided in lots and lots of different bits. And we haven't had we're beginning to see it in some areas, wine, for example, being a good one, possibly in the olive oil area where we heard a bit more before, where there isn't a proper restructuring of the sector to enable it to become globally competitive, to market globally. We heard from True Greece before the problems of either interconnecting the various bits of transport. I mean, having had to take a train replacement service this morning coming into the London from Norwich, I can tell you that the UK doesn't get it very right either, because I had to abandon my train halfway through to here and get on this very funny bus. But it is awful to try and get on public transport in the UK, in Greece. The only thing that really works reasonably well is the shipping service in terms of going from island to island, which I've always marvelled about. And even there isn't always a coordination. So we do need, therefore, a complete sort of rethink about how it is run. But if you don't have the big firms to allow you to improve your productivity, I mean, remember, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, if you have a high manufacturing sector, that is the sector that tends to be the most productive. That is the sector that exports. That is the sector that tends to invest. And that is the sector that puts most money into R&D in the economy. Services, unfortunately, and certainly of the type that the Greeks have, do not do it for you. And what is more, what we found, because I was working for the government at the time of the last, the UK government, of the recession, the financial crisis and then the recession here. There was again, I mean, the words we've just been hearing were coming through. Let's encourage entrepreneurship. Let's encourage people to go out and set their own businesses. And it's interesting, we had devised a scheme which was called an entrepreneurial grant. You gave it to people to start a business. There was hardly any take-up. People were terribly risk-averse. Nevertheless, many went down the self-employment route out of necessity. And of course, that has happened in Greece as well. What unfortunately happens when you do that, if it is not a proper business with proper planning and help, maybe from the likes of Reload Greece, you end up with those areas being terribly unproductive. I think one of the reasons why productivity has been low in this country is because we have had this huge increase in self-employment. What has happened, unfortunately, the way you measure productivity is actually what it is that you're earning, what gross value added there is in the various sectors. The self-employed, which have now amounted to sort of millions, have seen their real disposable incomes fall by 22% since the beginning of the crisis. And one of the reasons why we've continued to have had an increase in employment in the UK recently has been because of the self-employed. So you may create those, but they don't necessarily add huge value to the economy. So we have to watch it in terms of the types of firms we do. And that's why I think actually what we're doing today is so important, because what you need is the proper ambition, the funding, and the mentoring, of course, that is crucial. So what also we found here is that funding was important and was hugely important. One of the things, of course, that was done was help the banking sector and threw loads and loads of cash into the economy. It doesn't happen in Greece right now. Yes, there is a little bit of recovery in the banking sector taking place, but Greece has been starved of funds. And of course, we have the capital controls too that are there affecting it considerably. So, in other words, you already have these preconditions of failure, really, in a way. And then you've got all these other conditions which need to be looked at. The book sounds like a very, very welcome addition to what is required to understand what's going on in Greece. It's interesting that you're also talking about doing proper impact assessment of tax changes. We don't even do this in this country, by the way, so that's very good. We have cost-benefit analysis of everything we do in government, but not the Treasury, not really for tax changes, which is crazy, although there are bodies outside that look at this. But what you need is the following. You need certainty. If you're going to be a proper, productive and entrepreneurial country, you need certainty in your tax regime. There is no certainty in the Greek tax regime that I can see. And the costs that are imposed on people are absolutely enormous, with the requirement to pay taxes in advance and all that sort of stuff. Plus, you have the corruption aspect, where in order to get even your accounts accepted, you have to bribe somebody, which is perfectly accepted. And if you don't bribe them, then you're in trouble. The second thing that you need is, of course, to have the type of environment that also has a sort of bankruptcy law, if you like, which is one that you can trust. So the legal system is such that it allows you to fail and fail again. And of course, you need to ensure that the types of people who are around you have access to the skills that are important and the funding that I mentioned before. So I'm not suggesting that the UK is wonderful in this and Greece is not. Anything we learned here cannot be transferred. But there is an uphill struggle, I think, in Greece to get to those conditions. And let me just finish with the corruption thing, which of course we keep referring to. Now, small firms very often are another way of talking about the black market, because a lot of them don't, particularly now with the tax increases, they don't issue receipts and all that sort of stuff. There's a big black market everywhere. Now, we must not beat ourselves about Greece being a sort of real outlier there. There are bigger black markets across Europe. Like, look at Spain, well, enormous, possibly 25%. Look at Italy, very significant too. There is one interesting thing about Greece, which I keep mentioning, which is that there is a lot of corruption. It's endemic. It's all down the lines, everywhere. Every individual, though, does it for himself. I think the sad thing about Greece is that it hasn't been able to organize it as well as the Italians do. Then we probably will be doing a lot better. Thank you.